Welcome back to another episode of Appalachian Shine, the official podcast for the Foundation for Appalachian Advancement. Today, we've got a special guest on with us, Marshall Adesman, and we're going to be talking about a real piece of living history right here in our backyard. Marshall, thanks for coming on to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, you're with the Exchange Place. This is just right in our backyard over in Kingsport, Tennessee. I'm out of
Right.
Tazewell County, Virginia. So, a lot of our listeners are here in the central part. And the Exchange Place, I'm surprised I really hadn't run into this before I talked to you, but tell us a little bit about Exchange Place, this living piece of history right here in central Appalachia.
It certainly is. We call it a living history farm, which means that we are still a working farm. We have animals and they live at the farm 365 days a year. And so we have to feed them and take care of their medical, their health. But it's history in so far as 7 of the buildings that are on the farm are original to the site, and they were all built before the Civil War. In fact, only one of them was built after 1850. Everything else was built like between we think 1818. The records are very unclear, but we think the first building might have been around 1818. And then it went into the 1830s and 40s, and then one building was built in 1851. And then there are 2 buildings on the campus that are original to Kingsport, but not to our facility, and both got moved to Exchange Place at 2 different times. And both of those, believe it or not, date to the 1790s. So we've got some old facilities, and our job is to maintain them, of course, and to interpret them and explain them to people when they come visit us. We tell them what these buildings were, what and who lived there and what happened in these buildings and all that. We do this in a variety of ways, and we are in Kingsport, on the east side of Kingsport, on Orabank Road. And if somebody is interested in, I'll tell you as much as you want to know about it. But if they want to look it up, maybe while they're listening to us talk, we have a website which is Exchange Place TN, as in Tennessee, .org. Exchange Place, T as in Tom, N as in Nancy, .org. And it'll show you pictures of the farm and show you some of the events that we have. And we're real proud of it. We are, I need to mention this before you ask me another question. We are an all-volunteer organization. We are a nonprofit. We are not affiliated with the state of Tennessee, unlike, say, Rocky Mount or Tipton Haynes, both of which are down the road. And I'm not criticizing them at all. But we are not owned by the state of Tennessee. We are not owned by the county of Sullivan County or Kingsport City. We are owned by our little group. It's an association called the Netherlandian Exchange Place Association, and they don't really own us. We fall under their general umbrella, but it's operated by volunteers. There are no paid staff members. Anything we do is because we love doing it and because we're more than a little bit crazy. So
And to preserve that kind of history, being a nonprofit, if you're affiliated with the state, you have funding. Don't worry about that. Organization like yourself, you have to. It depends on the people that come there and visit,
right.
And whatever donations that you can get. So the fact that you're all volunteer, it really sort of puts that added stress and pressure on. And this one of the things I loved about the website, and I'm looking at it as well. We were talking before we started recording about how great this website really is, and really thorough. So yeah, if you're listening, make sure you jump on there and take a look at it while you're listening. ExchangePlaceTN.org. And when I was reading it, I was kind of wondering why is it called Exchange Place? But it says it was once a large farm that also served as a post office for the
That's
surrounding
correct.
Edens Ridge community and a relay station along the Great Stage Road, where travelers exchanged horses, money, goods, and stories. And now you just kind of recapture that life of the time, the early to mid 1800s with all these restored buildings and the animals and and the tours that you put on, and functions that you offer there, events at the farm,
Right.
with the buildings, the history, the animals, the gardens that you have there. This is really an amazing afternoon to for anybody local, or just needing a quick local road trip, to definitely go to this place and check it out. It's
Well, we hope that they will. There's another reason we're called Exchange Place, and it's to me it's the best one. And you're right. This was a relay station, so they would unhitch horses and let the tired horses go out and rest and bring up fresh horses. So they said that they were exchanging horses, and they also exchanged money because back in the years, actually up until like 1870 something, every state had its own money. And if you were living in Tennessee and you went to Virginia or vice versa or anywhere else, you had to have the money for that state in order to buy anything. So they used to exchange money, kind of like we do nowadays if we go overseas. But the best reason was that the original farm was developed by a man named John Gaines, and he was from Virginia. And he started putting up some of the buildings. He put up the earlier buildings from the 18 teens and the 20s and 30s. And then eventually he decided he wanted to go back to Virginia. We don't know exactly why, but we think maybe he was thinking, well, I'm older now. I don't know how much longer I'll have to live. I'd rather die and be buried in Virginia. We're just kind of guessing. He didn't he didn't have a Facebook account, so he didn't leave a good record for us. But so he let it be known that he had this farm that was available, and a man named John Preston came. John Preston was a Tennessean, and John Preston looked at the farm, rode around, decided he liked it, and said, you know what? He went to Mr. Gaines. He says, I have land in Virginia. I'll give you that land. You don't have to pay me anything. I'll give that to you, and you give me this land. And Gaines thought, that's a pretty good idea. So they exchanged
oh
land.
wow, okay.
There are several reasons, as you mentioned, why we're called Exchange Place. That's my favorite because it really goes to the heart of the property. But yeah, we have several public festivals over the course of a year. We had one in April, our spring garden fair. The weather was perfect, and we had a nice turnout. We have one coming up July. Let me make sure I have the right date.
Actually, it's the 21st. I'm looking at it right now
There
on
you
your
go.
website.
July, that was in the back of my mind,
Yeah.
but I wanted to be sure. July 21st, and people who might be interested in that because there's no admission charge. It's absolutely free for everybody. When we had our spring fair, when we're going to have our fall festival in September, it costs an arm and a leg. It costs $5
Wow.
if you're over the age of 12 to get in, and you can stay all day if you want. You can get there at 10 o'clock in the morning and just hang out all day for $5. If you're under the age of 12, there is no charge. But on July 21st, there's no charge for anybody, no matter what your age. Now, it's a smaller event. It's only 3 hours. It's designed mostly for kids, but there will be a little bit of music, and there will be lots and lots of children's activities, and you'll get to look at the buildings. You don't get to go in, but you can go by. There will be volunteers like myself at several of the buildings and can explain to you what they were and what their significance is. So that's, I mean, it might be a good introduction if somebody's never been out to Exchange Place and they want to kind of test the waters. Come on out, there's no charge, and just wander around a little bit. You can ask questions, and then if you decide, hey, I think I'd like to come back at some point, then we have our fall festival in September.
Yeah, that's the Fall Folk Arts Festival, and yeah, so this is a couple of events that were coming up, and I was curious with with the festival, the pictures online. It's beautiful property, and I'm just wondering, I love when fall comes around because I'm colorblind, and actually I get to see this plethora of colors for really the first time all year for like 2 or 3 weeks when everything kind of changes.
Uh,
And I'm just wondering, what's it like in the fall on the farm? I guess, are there more people that come in the fall than they do in the summer, or?
no, actually, our spring festival is our biggest event of the year. And if the weather is good like it was in April, we probably had a couple thousand people or so over the course of the weekend. Now we're not open generally. we're at this stage in our lives, we are open only for festivals. However, if somebody comes, if somebody looks at it, if somebody, for instance, comes next month and says, boy, I'd really like a tour of this place. I love old buildings. They could call us and we could arrange for literally a personal tour. But the fall is gorgeous, especially you get into October, early part of November. The trees change their colors, the leaves change colors, and it's just absolutely gorgeous, and it's not too hot, it's not too cold. It's really a very, very, very special place to be. Um, and if you wanted to come out for a tour in October, we can handle that. You just have to call us in advance and arrange it with somebody. We have a caretaker. We have a young family, husband and wife, and their two young children who are easily the luckiest children on the face of the earth because they are getting to grow up right there on that farm, and
That is
they run
amazing.
around like crazy all
Oh,
the
that's
time. I mean, this is their backyard. This is home to them. But our caretakers have several functions, one of which is to feed the animals and keep an eye on everybody, make sure they're healthy. And if they're suspicious about the health of, say, one of our horses, call the vet. But also they'll pick up phone calls. So you might call and get a recording, and you'd leave a name, you leave your name and phone number and say, I might be interested in having coming out for a personal tour. They'll get back to you, or they'll get back to one of us and say, here's somebody who called, Mr. and Mrs. John Smith called and they're interested in coming out and bringing the family. Give them a call and arrange for something, and we will definitely do that. So yeah, if you want to come out somebody wanted to come out in the fall, the weather is spectacular.
yeah. You very well may be hearing from me because I'm over in Kingsport from time to time, and but I just haven't been out. None of those Bays Mountain there too. So I've been there,
Right.
but before we get into this really interesting piece of history I found on your website, you mentioned the animals. Um, Tell us a little bit about the animals, and I guess when kids come in there during the festivals, do they get to?
Right.
Is it kind of like
They
a pet
do.
zoo? Do they get to do that?
They do. They get to meet the animals, the bigger animals, the horses, the cows. Cow, we only have one cow left. We have a couple of horses, a cow, and a donkey. Um, we have them out in the barn. That's the quote unquote new building. That's from 1851.
Oh, the
That's
new
the
one.
that's the
Okay.
newest of the buildings that are out there. And we know that it's from 1851 because we actually found a contract. Mr. Preston, who, as I said, he had exchanged land with Mr. Gaines. So Mr. Preston and his family were living out there, and they must have decided they needed a new barn, but they didn't have the dad and the two boys just didn't have the time to do it. They had all sorts of other things to do.
Yeah.
So they subcontracted it, and they hired a couple of guys to come out and build them a new barn. So in 1851, it cost a little less than $300 to build that barn. Now I've looked it up, and it's worth like about $12,000 in today's money, which is still pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So anyway, they built this barn in 1851, and that's where we have the animals. So if you come out with the family, either at this upcoming event on July 21st, which is called Farm Fest, or you come for the fall festival, or you decide you want to come for a private tour, the animals will be the animals will be out in the barn or in that general area. If you come for a private tour, we're not going to have them sitting there, so we
Yeah.
can't guarantee that you'll get to go over and talk to them. But if you come to the festivals, yeah, you'll get to see them. You get to talk to the animals, pet them, uh, learn a little bit about them. Plus, we have sheep, and the sheep are all over the place. There's about 7 or 8 sheep right now. And when we do the festival, especially in the fall festival, and we also have a festival the first Saturday in December, the sheep will be kind of contained in a couple of areas. So you get to see them and talk to them. Plus, we have pigs, a couple of pigs that are out there. We have a bunch of chickens and a rooster or two. There are wild turkey that don't usually make public appearances, especially around Thanksgiving time. But they and we also have 2 or 3 or 4 cats. The cats kind of come and go. The cats use it as kind of a B&B, but we have two
Yeah, I'd
cats
imagine
that,
it's a barn
yeah,
cat. Yeah,
we have two cats that live out there pretty regularly, and one of them is a boy cat. He loves people. So if he hears a human voice, he comes trotting out. He wants to say hi. He wants you to pet him. So if you bring kids out, especially for the festivals, you'll get to see these animals all the time. It's great fun.
now, I did want to bring up a really interesting piece of history I saw on the website because um, one of America's greatest pioneers was Daniel Boone, and I guess he had so much relevance and importance in just America becoming America. There's so much that this guy that did, from setting up forts in various places
Right.
for Lord Dunmore's war through this region, and that's part of the history, the unique history. But there's a Daniel Boone, what's called the Daniel Boone block there on the farm.
Right.
Tell people what that is, because I find that incredible. I was actually just at his burial site in Frankfort, Kentucky, where my
Uh-huh.
office. Him and his wife, they had their bodies moved to Frankfurt. It's overlooking the capital city, the capital from the top of the hill. So it's
Mhm.
very fascinating to go there and know that this amazing American pioneer and just legend, and now we have a tie right there to your farm, right? So
And it's a great story. So I mentioned that John Gaines had started the facility, and we think sometime in the 1840s he decided he wanted to go back to Virginia. So here comes John Preston, and John Preston rides around, and as I said, he's impressed by the farm. He sees all the wonderful things about it. Then he sees, looks like something's written on a tree. Now back then you didn't see a lot of people carving their names or their initials on trees. They didn't hang posters and missing cat or
yeah,
missing kid or anything like that. So he said, "Well, that's kind of strange. What's written on this tree?" So he went over and looked, and it said Daniel Boone killed a bar on this tree, 1775. And he realized, John Preston realized, that this was not only great farmland, this is historic land. And that's when he went back to Mr. Gaines and said, "Let's make a deal." So the story that has been passed on, I guess John Preston started to ask questions and got information, and that has been passed on to us, 200 years later, is that Daniel Boone was on the property with his axeman. Um, a man named Henderson was a big real estate developer at the time and owned well over 100,000 acres, but he was kind of upset because the acreage was all just filled with trees and bushes and flowers and things. Henderson, typical real estate guy, wanted to sell the land, have people buy plots of land to develop their own farms. Nobody was buying because they couldn't even, all they could see was trees. They couldn't even walk around and say, "Oh, looks like a good spot." So he says, "Daniel, why don't you chop down a bunch of trees and make me a pathway so that people can walk with their horses and walk around and look and say, 'Oh, I like that spot over there.'" And then they'd go back to Henderson and they'd work out a deal, so much an acre or whatever. So Daniel said, "Well, I can do this, but I need help." So that's when he got permission to hire these axemen. And I always tell people, if I give a tour, I said, "They're axemen, they're not X-Men. Wolverine was not involved." And so Daniel and his guys took their axes and they started at what is now the state line between North Carolina and Tennessee. And they started chopping down trees and came through, and they went all the way to Kentucky. And this is kind of an offshoot of the Wilderness Road.
yeah.
So one night in 1775, they're doing their work. They get to what is now Exchange Place. There's nothing there, of course, nobody's living there. And they go to sleep for the night and they wake up in the morning and they're gonna have something to eat and get started on chopping down some more trees. And here comes a bear out of the woods. And this big old bear sees all these guys, and bear thinks, "This is the greatest day of my life. I'm gonna kill all these men. I'll have enough food to last me right through the fall and the winter. I won't go hungry this winter." So the bear attacks. Daniel fights the bear. He's the leader. He fights the bear, and then he kills the bear. So he's kind of proud of himself, and he takes his knife and he carves on the tree, "Daniel Boone killed a bar." D. Boone, it doesn't even say Daniel. D. Boone killed a bar on this tree, 1775. And then the men go continue their work. And I always tell people that is probably the first example of Twitter, because he definitely stayed within the number of characters. Anyway, so now that was 1775. Now you've got about 60 some years later. Here comes John Preston, sees this and realizes it's historic land and makes his deal with John Gaines, gives him Virginia land and takes Gaines's Tennessee property. So that's the story behind that. We have a replica of that, of what was carved on the tree, in our main house. The original is in a house, the Preston home in Abingdon, Virginia, which is
Oh,
not open
okay,
to the
yeah.
public. I wish it was open to the public. Years ago, it used to be. I never got over there when they'd open it up for occasional tours, but they don't do that anymore, which is too bad. I'd love to see the original. But anyway, if you come to our place, you can see the replica of what was carved on the tree. And that's our Daniel Boone story. That is our claim to Daniel Boone's many multivaried past.
Well, that is one cool story, and the fact it's right there in Abingdon, the little
Yeah,
town I know well. And I used to live there for a handful of years, and still have family there. And but yeah, the Preston House is a really great place. I knew they hadn't opened up in a long time, but that's cool that the original is right in there, and that's
right.
another really interesting piece of history hanging around in Abingdon. Just a little food for just to toss this out there, but at the Abingdon Masonic Lodge is a soup ladle that George Washington had taken and
Is that
used.
right?
And yeah, as he traveled, he left it there for the Masonic Lodge.
Huh.
So that's kind of cool. So, and then of
I
course
know
the tavern.
the cemetery there in Abington is just fascinating because
Yeah.
they got stuff that goes back to the 18th century. It's headstones. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, certainly. And then the old tavern downtown.
Yeah,
It's
yep.
a restaurant now, but that is an amazing building. If you haven't eaten there, food's pretty good.
Yeah,
So, but when you go in, it's like walking back in the 1700s. It's really
right.
fascinating. Now, I did want to before, yeah, I don't want to keep you too long on this, but I did want to ask because you have the fall folk arts coming up in September, that
Right.
festival. You do offer a lot of youth and school programs and some workshops. Can you
Correct.
talk a little bit about those? Because I think a lot of people might be interested in going out to some of these workshops and from the area there. It really festivals always offer these, especially the big one there in Abingdon. So,
Mhm.
but to have that right there at the exchange place is kind of neat to have there. So, talk a little bit about those youth and school programs.
Sure. The youth programs are really designed with our local schools. In April and May, we'll have our area elementary schools. A lot of them will come out and bring second, third, or fourth graders to learn about what life was like in the early to mid 19th century. And we have fun with that because we dress up in costume. If I go out there, I have an old costume, big old straw hat, and I am Mr. Preston. And I tell them I'm Mr. Preston. If somebody asks, "Well, you're not from around," yeah, I'm Mr. Preston. I live here. Do you? Because I've even had people say, "Do you live here?" Yes, I live here. I try to stay in character the whole time. But we teach them what life was like in that time. If they come when they come into the cabin, I show them different things that are in the house where we sleep. We have something called a mammy's bench, mama's bench. I demonstrate that. We talk about the spinning wheel and um, the quilting bench that we have. And then we'll take them outside and we'll play some games that, kids didn't have Game Boys back then. They didn't have their cell phones to play games with. They had to do what we would consider very primitive things that they made themselves. We have a tic-tac-toe set that's made strictly from wood and string. Um, you just take some wood and you make a tic-tac-toe board, and then you take a couple small pieces of wood and tie them together. That's your X, like like that.
Yeah,
And for your O, we got rocks galore. So you just take the rocks, and those are your O's. So we show them games like that. We have something called a G-Haw Wimmy Diddle, which is also just made from wood. That was a popular game. There's yo-yos. There's checkerboard. Checkers was very popular, and checkers were made from corn husks. So we explain that to the kids. So we do that in the spring. In the fall, we bring in younger kids, generally kindergarten or preschool kids, and they get to meet the animals. And they get to learn about these animals. And we used to do a hayride for them. I don't know if we do that anymore, but we do that in the fall. Now, we have had some homeschool groups contact us, and if somebody who is watching or listening is part of a homeschool group, you might want to contact us and see about bringing your group out for a visit at some point in time, and we have people that will work with you on that. So I'll just real quick give you the phone number. It's 423-288-6071. But again, the website exchangeplacetn.org, you'll find all that information there as well. So you can be able to contact us that way. If you're interested in bringing a school group out. As far as you asked me something else.
Workshops. Yeah.
Workshops, that's
Yeah.
correct. We have, there's a lady that does a workshop at our spring and fall festivals in needle felting, which is, she makes critters out of felt. And she will have this workshop during those festivals and teach you how to do that. And it's fascinating, a fascinating thing that she does. And her work is absolutely phenomenal. She always has a booth out there to show what she does on her own. And of course, the things that she has out there at the booth are available for sale. They're just phenomenal. She made a dinosaur. I swear I had to talk myself out of buying it because my wife says it's just one more thing to dust. But I tell you what, it was so phenomenal. I mean, it looked like a real dinosaur, but it's made out of felt. So she does this workshop. We also have a fellow who comes and does chair caning, teaches you how to literally put together a chair. And he does that workshop, I think, a couple times a year. So that happens. And then we have a group called the Over Mountain Weavers Guild. Now they are out there on Exchange Place regularly, 12 months a year. And in fact, when you come for festivals, you'll get to see them working. They'll be using spinning wheels and looms. They'll be making things the way people made clothing, scarves, sweaters, things like that. Curtains. They made curtains that we now hang in the Preston House. So they do it all the way it was done 150, 200 years ago. And they are always looking for more people to join them. So if you're interested in something like that, you can come out and talk to the weavers, and they even have they have a boot camp, I think, in August, and you can
Wow.
come out. You can come out and work for a few days and see if you like it. I think there is an admission for that, but and you can contact the weavers through us. But that's a workshop that I think a lot of people might be interested in, because it really, especially if you're creative and you like working with your hands and you think this would be great to be able to make my own clothes, or at least some of them. These are the people to talk to. So that's another workshop that is ongoing.
And these traditional crafts and arts, like this is such a lost art, and it's great to see places where people can go and actually learn these things. And it reminds me of my grandmother when I was very young, and the things that our grandparents would do. And then now no one does this. Everything is so
Right.
commercialized and processed somewhere else. And even something as simple as canning, your stuff from your garden.
Right.
That's a lost art. And but it's great to see that this exchange place is here local, and people can go and learn these things and have such a great time there. Now, one thing we talked about before we started recording, it turns out you're also a local writer. You just
I
published
am.
your first book. Tell us a little bit about what's the name of the book.
I will. But first of all, if I could get one thing back to Exchange Place, when we
Yeah.
do our spring and summer festival, spring and fall and winter festivals, um, the place is not only open for you to look at, but there are vendors out there. And the reason I mention is because you talked about these old time crafts. The vendors that we have out there, for the most part, are doing this kind of work in their basements, in their living rooms. They are making their own note cards. They are making their own soap. They are making their own pottery. And so we really specialize in having vendors out there who are creative. They're not trying to sell something that they have already bought at a big box store. Everything that they've got out there in their tables or in their tents are things that they have made themselves. So this speaks to what you were saying earlier about these old time crafts. We are all about trying to maintain the integrity of these old time crafts. So that is one of the main reasons why we're in existence. We're an educational institution, but we're also really for preservation of history. That's very, very important to us. In fact, we have a group of youngsters, they're generally middle school and high school age, who are also interested in that. And they sign up and work with us. We call them junior apprentices. You see them out at the festivals, they're wearing old time costumes and they're working in the kitchen, or they're working chopping wood or doing this or that. And they are also interested in this. And our hope is that as they get a little older, they'll take over for some of us old timers and help to keep Exchange Place going. As far as writing, this is my first novel. I had co-authored a nonfiction book. Oh, it's about 20 years ago now. But this is a novel, a historical novel called The Mountain Empire League. And as you mentioned, I am a big baseball fan. And I worked in baseball for about a dozen years in the minor leagues. And I came across this story some years ago. It was a nonfiction story about a minor league it's either Georgia or South Carolina, in the very early 1950s, just a few years after Jackie Robinson broke the color line. And this league tried to bring in a African-American player and break the color line in their league, and it did not go well. 1950, 51, 52, something like that. The Jim Crow South was still not ready for it. And I thought, this is kind of an interesting story. I wonder if I could develop it into something else. So over a period of about 10 or 12 years, I worked on this story. I did research and started developing, and I made up a league. The Mountain Empire League never existed in real life. If you look it up in your baseball encyclopedia, you will not find it. It came out of my head. The 8 cities in the league all came out of my head. Although you mentioned the name of one, Eden's Ridge, I decided I would make that one of my cities. That was the area where Exchange Place is now. That was at one time called Eden's Ridge. And so for my book, I used the name Eden's Ridge, and then I made up all the other cities. And I made this story about a young African-American. He's actually from Asheville. He gets seen by the husband and wife team that owns and operates the Eden's Ridge team, and they think he's really good. We want to sign him for our league. And then the story is about what happens, how they first have to get it through. The league has to approve it, and that's not the easiest thing in the world. And then when they do get it approved, they bring him in, and he runs into, as you might expect, a whole lot of hatred, to be blunt, and different things happen along the way. And people try to throw up barriers in his path to stop him from playing ball. So that is the premise behind the book. It's called The Mountain Empire League. If you're interested in it, there's a website. There's a website for everything. And this website is called mountainempireleague.com. The Mountain Empire League, all one word, no capitals. mountainempireleague.com. If you go to that website, you can read a little bit about the book. You can read a little bit about me. You can read some other things that I've written, and you can see how you can buy it. It is available for sale.
I was actually just looking here on Amazon, and it's on there too. Chris Holiday, he wrote a book called Cracks in the Outfield Wall. I haven't read that, but a friend of mine actually has that on his shelves. That's where I knew this name. And here's a review of it. It says, Adesman has done a masterful job of capturing the essence of minor league baseball in the South in the 1950s. Thanks to what was undoubtedly an immense amount of research, he leads his fascinating characters through their adventures, both on and off field and off all the wild bending, um, blending and true events and people. Sports fan or not, this is a great read. And you can get it on Kindle or paperback on Amazon too. So definitely check that out. It sounds like a fascinating book.
Well, I had fun writing it, and I hope people will enjoy it. And by the way, Chris Holiday and I have been friends for, I don't know, maybe 30 years or so. He did a book some years ago, a series of um, baseball essays, and I contributed a couple of those pieces. Yeah, I haven't gotten his book yet. In fact, I was thinking about it the other day. I need to get in there and buy it because it's a similar story. It's just he's going from the more of the historical standpoint, and mine was based on history. And a lot of the people in the book are historical. Satchel Paige makes a brief appearance, and some other real baseball people. And since I worked in the minor leagues, I worked in some incidents that I either experienced myself or was told about secondhand. So there's a lot of real history in my novel. Anyway, I appreciate your asking me about it.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I'm a baseball fan too, and yeah, um, just the history of the Appalachian League and some of the old coal camps that used to have
Right.
baseball teams in their coal camps. They would keep it was a fascinating story because everybody worked for the company. You lived in a company house. You shopped from the company store. So to keep morale up, they would have these baseball teams, and they would travel from one coal camp to another and play each other. And the crowds were phenomenal and really took it personal and loved the game. So baseball is such a big part of America.
It
Baseball is
sure is.
America. It's so anytime I see an interesting story about baseball, I always like to gravitate to it. So I'm glad it's just so cool that you wrote that, and I just found out about that today. So I'll definitely pick up the book. I'll get this on my Kindle and give it a read and a review.
Well,
So
great. Yeah, we just went on Kindle a few weeks ago. We didn't have Kindle at first, but maybe about a month or so ago, we got onto Kindle. And there's another website, the publisher's website. It's local, LOCAL dash author.com. And you could buy the book from them. You don't save any money on the price, but you'll get it quicker than you would with Amazon because Amazon's kind of a middleman. It's not like
yeah,
Amazon's got stacks of books. So if Amazon gets an order for my book, they have to contact the publisher who then prints it on demand. If
yeah,
you go right to the publisher, it'll come to you a little bit quicker. So that's local-author.com.
yeah. And I do the same thing. I'm a self-published author, and so I go through Amazon KDP. I have a few books under a pen name. So that yeah, it takes a little time, for them to print it up and send
Right.
it. But are you by the just chance, are you a member of a local guild out there or anything like that?
You mean baseball wise?
No, like a writers guild.
Yeah, in next the town right next to Kingsport is Mount Carmel. I lived in Mount Carmel when we first moved here. Our first dozen or so years we lived in Mount Carmel. Um, it's a cute little community of less than 5,000 people. Um, and they have a adorable little library. And one time I noticed that they had a sign out about a writers group. So I contacted them about it, and uh, she put me in touch with the lady who runs it. And so uh, I've been a member of that group now for a little while. We meet monthly, and we encourage people who are interested in writing. And you don't have to live in Mount Carmel. You can live anywhere in the area. We
Yeah,
encourage people to come out. But it's a great group because we really just we bounce ideas off one another, and we'll have little exercises. The lady who runs it will say, well, today we're going to work on this about, using color as a descriptor in your fiction or in any of your work. So we have a real good time with that. I enjoy going to that group a lot.
yeah. I'm a member of Appalachian Authors Guild, and have
Mhm.
friends that are part of the Law State Writers, which is
Yeah.
out of Tennessee. So yeah, we do have monthly workshops too, and I do for those who can't get there in the daytime. I run one in the evening once a month
Ah,
where we have a Zoom call and we have a presenter that'll talk about a certain topic, and then we'll just have roundtable discussion. It's really I find it incredibly helpful. I've learned
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
from these people who have
It,
done a lot
it
more
is
than me.
very it is very helpful with your writing. Especially getting ideas from other people. We have some really creative people in our group, and I'm sure you do as well. And it's just I find it just really interesting.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming on. So again, it's exchangeplacetn.org. Make sure you go there. If you have a few bucks, make a donation because having a nonprofit like ours as well, it's the same thing. It all revolves around you that are listening to this and following us online. Do you have a Facebook page? People can follow you there as well.
There is that when we have an event, there is a Facebook page, events page. So right now there's probably nothing much on it. But they'll probably put something on it in another week or two regarding Farm Fest, and then it'll be kind of dormant until maybe September, late August, early September, when they'll start hyping the Fall Folk Arts Festival. Um, that's the only Facebook page that I'm familiar with.
All right. So, folks, make plans to go out to Exchange Place for Farm Fest July 21st. And then the Fall Folk Arts Festival starts in September, late September. I
Late
think was
September. The exact dates are going to be the 28th and 29th of September.
yeah. Bring your kids out, have a good time, and thanks again. I appreciate you coming on, Marshall. Thanks for sharing your book.
Oh,
Fascinating
sure.
stuff.
Again, I appreciate you asking about it.
And thanks again for all those who are tuning in and listening or watching on YouTube. Make sure you check us out and follow us on at supportappalachia.org. And we will see you on down the road on the next show. Thanks again for listening, everyone.